Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that so many of you have joined us today to reflect on race equality and the state of the sector. I'm Denzine White, the chair of Sporting Equals, and it's my great privilege to be opening this digital event today. Sporting Equals has been continuously working to uplift and engage with ethnically diverse communities in sport and physical activity since its conception as a charity. We are proud to platform and support the views of our associate member network, which is comprised of the values and views of over 200,000 service users. Sporting Equals works continuously to advocate issues to reduce racial inequality in sport through campaigns as well as on-the-ground community projects. We achieve this by working with key partners such as Spirit of 2012, Youth Sport Trust, Peloton, Swift, Sweaty Betty, and more recently Sky. Sporting Equals continues to build on this support to the sports sector directly through the Sporting Equals Charter, which delivers support on race equality to over 70 signatories that include 27 national governing bodies of sport and 8 active partnerships. Today, we will be speaking to many esteemed panelists around the subject of race equality and the state of the sector. We hope through this event, there will be some key insights and learning delivered that we can all take forward when delivering spaces for all ranges of communities for sport and physical activity. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and hand over to our host, Michelle Moore. Michelle is an award-winning leadership coach, author, speaker, and educator, voted as one of the UK's 50 most influential women in sport. She is a globally recognized executive on inclusive, conscious leadership. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Denzine, and a very big thank you to Sporting Equals for asking me to host for the second year. It's a real privilege of mine to be here. So a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us, and thank you for your messages in the chat. We have people from Wales, Glasgow, Somerset, Yorkshire, Dundee. It's wonderful to see so many of you online. Thank you very much for being here. We have a packed agenda for you today. And if I was in the room physically with you, I'd be smiling at everybody. So I hope you can feel my energy through the screen this morning. As with all digital events, I will ask for your grace, very much so at the very top, because we are online and we are live. So just asking for your grace with that. And also sending my warmest wishes for everybody on this call as the global pandemic and the events that are going on at the moment affect all of us. So a very warm welcome to everybody. It's fantastic that we are also being live streamed, and that means that we have people that are joining us all on YouTube. So a very warm welcome to you. This event is called the State of the Sector event. So we are looking at race equality through sport and physical activity. And what does this mean for you? So we're hoping that you'll be able to learn lots from our packed agenda. We'll have key updates for you from politicians, from grassroots organisations, and from representatives from Sporting Equals. And we would love it if you could get onto the socials. As you can see, the hashtag is SE for Sporting Equals, Race Equality Event 2022. And make sure that you tag Sporting Equals into that as well. So just to set a bit of the context for those of you that are new today, Sporting Equals continues to grow as one of the leading race equality think tanks and charities within the UK that champions building healthier, stronger and fairer communities through sport and physical activity. And they've been doing that for over 20 years now. Last year, the charity made great strides in campaigning for the ceasing and the retiring of the term BAME, and have been really successful with working with organisations around the advocacy of that. This year, you're going to hear about the Race Representation Index, which has been pioneered by this charity. Some of you may have seen that in the media today, which looks at issues around ethnic diverse representation at an elite level, in the workforce, and at coaching level as well. So there's a lot to get through in our agenda, and as always, Sporting Equals have been at the root of supporting grassroots organisations with their sustainability and also distributing funds equitably. The charity continues to really make a difference in supporting organisations in their project delivery and community brokerage. One of the key areas that they've been working on for many years now is the representation of ethnically diverse communities at a board level. And this year has seen the resurgence of the Leaderboard Academy, with over 18 individuals developing new skills to sit on sports boards. So we're going to be hearing more of that as we go through our agenda. Of course, that's just a snapshot of what Sporting Equals do. Hopefully by the end of today's session, you'll know them much more. And those of you that do know Sporting Equals, you'll be able to take lots of the tips and the recommendations and guidance that will be able to strengthen your policies that look at anti-racism within sport. So, without further ado, having set the context, I hope that's okay. I am just assuming it's always really strange just talking through the laptop, even though we've been doing it for a couple of years. I hope that gives you the context for today. And I want to open our summit very warmly with an introduction to Nigel Huddleston, who is the Minister for Sport and Tourism. Nigel joined us last year. He's joining us again this year, and we're very, very happy that he's with us. He's from the Department of Digital Culture and Media and Sport, and I'm going to hand over to you now, Nigel.
Great, thanks very much, Michelle and Denzine, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to today's event on race equality, and thanks very much to Sporting Equals for inviting me once again to say a few words to you all. Now, I firmly believe that sport is for everyone, and one of my top priorities as sports minister is getting more people playing sport and being active. And that's why the issues being discussed today are so vitally important. Now, I know that Sporting Equals has played a vital role over the last 20 years in championing equality and inclusion at all levels, from grassroots and elite sport all the way to boardrooms. And sport can be a really powerful tool in bringing people together, communities, engaging young people from all backgrounds. And this is something that I am committed to, as we know sport has the ability to enrich the lives of individuals and entire communities. And everyone should have the opportunity to access these benefits. I know Sporting Equals have been doing some really great work in this area with the successful delivery of their Making Equals project in Bradford, Burnley, and Croydon. And that project focuses on engaging diverse young people through sport and inspiring them to make a difference in their local community. And projects like this show how sport can unite different people from different backgrounds all across the country. And there's an opportunity as a sector to address some of the persistent challenges for underrepresented groups in sport and to progress further than we've ever been. But we won't get this right on our own, and we need help from you to achieve our goal of making sport truly accessible to all. The challenges during COVID-19 and grassroots sport these last couple of years have been really difficult for the sports sector and society as a whole. And we know that our collected efforts to reduce inequalities in physical activity have suffered a real setback due to the pandemic. And people from ethnically diverse backgrounds in particular have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic in a large number of ways. And we know that those who are part of more than one underrepresented group have felt compounded effects. And this only strengthens my resolve, as I'm sure it does for all of you, to redouble our efforts as we emerge from the pandemic and ensure we keep the focus on reducing inequality in sport and physical activity. Now, the importance of being active was especially highlighted during the pandemic, as we saw that a huge role being active can play in helping not just our physical health, but our mental health too. There is a need to support, sustain and grow community and grassroots sport. And as DCMS's arm's length body for grassroots sport in England, Sport England have provided vital support for grassroots sport during the pandemic, with over £270 million provided to help the sector. And of that, £20 million was allocated to the Together Fund to support underrepresented groups whose physical activity levels had been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And with the success of the fund, an additional £20 million has been allocated to carry the funding until March 2023. Over 4 million from the Together Fund has been awarded to over 1,000 projects working specifically with people from ethnically diverse backgrounds. And Sport England's new 10-year strategy, Uniting the Movement, also reinforces their commitment to tackling inequalities faced in sport by underrepresented groups, including ethnically diverse people. Now, to implement this commitment, we need your support. Sport England has identified some key system partners, such as Sporting Equals, to help deliver on this. But we also need the engagement of the entire sports sector to ensure that inclusion is occurring at all levels. There's also been the persistent challenge of tackling racism in sport. And news of incidents like the Azim Rafiq case make it clear that there is still much more to be done to eradicate racism in sport. And I'm clear that there is no room for racism or any form of discrimination in sport or society at large, and I'm personally committed to doing all we can to tackle racism in sport. Sport England, UK Sport, and the other home nations sports councils have also been working hard to address this. They published the results of a detailed independent review into tackling racism and racial inequality in sport in June last year. And in December last year, the 5 sports councils outlined the current actions being taken to address the recommendations from the review. Sport England has already established a participant working group, and an insight working group is reviewing the gaps in the analysis relating specifically to children, young people, and workforce. And whilst UK Sport recently published their Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan with targeted representation for ethnic diversity and workforce development. And UK Sport's also finalising options around creating an independent process for complaints, which includes handling discriminatory behaviour such as racism, and is engaging with the other sports councils on this. So you have my assurance that the government is committed to tackling racism, and we will continue to work closely with our arm's length bodies, national governing bodies, and organisations like yours to ensure that this is being addressed at all levels, from grassroots through to boardrooms. We know that having visible role models is important, and a key part of diversity and inclusion is having representation at all levels of sport. And that's why we're looking at diversity across the whole of the sports sector. We want to ensure that alongside driving participation, we're also increasing access and opportunity to the highest levels of sport. We're working closely with UK Sport, our arm's length body for elite sport in the UK, to ensure diversity and inclusion is occurring at an elite level and in Olympic and Paralympic sport. And we're looking to leverage major events and legacy work to help those from ethnically diverse backgrounds to get involved in sport at all levels. There are some incredible events happening this year in the UK, which really give us the opportunity to showcase and platform diversity in sport. In fact, not too far from my own constituency this summer, the UK will host the Birmingham Commonwealth Games 2022. And the motto of the Games is the Games for everyone, with every community able to access the opportunities and benefits that the Games will provide. And Birmingham is home to a huge number of ethnicities and is one of the youngest cities in Europe. And we want to champion this diversity and use the Games to bring people together for an international celebration of sport and culture. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about the incredible work taking place from Jeff Thompson, who's the Deputy Chair of the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. And he'll be speaking, I gather, later on today. Now, aside from driving participation and improving access, we've also been working with our arm's length bodies to make the sports sector a safe and inclusive place for everyone. The Code for Sports Governance has been a key tool to help sporting organisations tackle some of the issues affecting underrepresented groups. And by clearly setting the standards that all national and governing bodies need to meet in return for public funding from UK Sport or Sport England, I'm pleased to say that the Code has proved successful in setting very clear expectations around diversity, especially in leadership. The Code was updated last year, and it places an increased focus on diversity in decision-making and ensuring that sports organisations reflect the communities that they serve. So sports receiving the most funding will be required to agree a diversity and inclusion action plan with Sport England and UK Sport, which will be published and updated annually. Expert organisations in the sector, such as Sporting Equals, and many of you here today, will be key in aiding national governing bodies of sport in the development of these plans. And diversity of representation and thought is something this government feels strongly about. So we hope the changes in the Code, as well as reviews such as the Sports Council's review into tackling racism in sport, will help the sports sector become even stronger in this respect. Now, we're in the process also of refreshing the government's sports strategy with a clear focus on these priorities, which will put accessibility and inclusivity at its heart. Improving access to the sector means making sure that everyone from wherever in the country and whatever background has the opportunity to take part in sport and physical activity. And it's imperative that we have a rich and varied sport offer so that physical activity is accessible to all, no matter a person's background or location. And through the strategy, we'll consider how we can be even more innovative to deliver this objective, such as considering how to more effectively use data to shape interventions. We want to build back better and fitter from COVID, and to ensure a successful and sustainable future for sport. And by working in partnership with other government departments and the sector, we have the opportunity to ensure that our interventions genuinely increase access and opportunity for all, whilst also recognising the need for a targeted focus to support underrepresented groups, such as ethnically diverse groups, to continue to drive participation in sport and physical activity. We'll do what we can in government to help, but it needs to be a joint effort. And as I said, you and your organisations are vital in helping achieve our aims of tackling racial inequality and increasing diversity in the sector. Awareness and understanding of the needs of diverse ethnic communities within the sports and health sector are key to changing attitudes and increasing participation at all levels. And now, more than ever, your insight and collaboration is essential if we're to continue progressing. And on that note, I wish you all very well for today's event. I know you have a great lineup of speakers, and I hope you'll get the chance to engage in some informative discussions and link up with others in the sector to further this really important work. Thanks for the time, and I hope the rest of the day goes well.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that opening. It gives us a really good insight as to the government's commitments and some of your priorities. I think what I heard from that is that redoubling of some of the effort and the collective effort that you were talking about there, especially when we're thinking about the governance code that hasn't gone far enough for some of the community grassroots organisations on this summit and event today. So I thank you for your contribution. We have our first keynote speaker today is Sports England Chief Executive Tim Hollingsworth, who's going to take us through the work of Sport England. And Tim is responsible for sport and physical activity at a community level across England. And we're going to hear straight away from Tim now as we kind of kind of race through our agenda, and I'm hoping that we'll have a bit of time for some questions as well. So over to Tim.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Good morning to you all. Good morning, Denzine, and good morning, Minister. I was listening very intently to the Minister's opening address there, not least because I'm very conscious that some of what Nigel just spoke about, you would expect I'm going to also touch on. But I think that's a really good sign, because I think what it shows is just how, from government's point of view, from DCMS, the ambition that they have, the determination that they have to tackle the inequalities that we all acknowledge exist, and create better opportunities for people in sport and physical activity are absolutely where we are grounded, where we are landed with our ambition, with our strategy, and indeed in some of the examples that the Minister gave in our investment. So my hope in the time, and Michelle, I picked up on your point, I will look to keep to time, is very much to give you in a keynote way a sense of where we are at right now, but also the journey that we're on. And I think for many organizations that are in this call, and indeed some of my fellow speakers, one that we very much want to share. When I was sort of thinking about and preparing for this morning, I found myself thinking about a few milestones. The one that actually prompted it was that the BSL Awards in 2020 was my final event, as it probably was for almost all of you, before lockdown hit. I can remember it very vividly, not least because I spent the evening next to Chris Akabusi, and therefore conversation was lively throughout. But more importantly, it reminded me just how long ago that was, and therefore what the pandemic has done to some of the work that we were all engaged in then, and the expectations that we have. But it's not the only milestone that springs to mind. I mean, it was just before that, actually, in January, many of you would have joined us in Birmingham at Villa Park, in fact, for our Sport for All conference, where we perhaps for the first time as Sport England accepted that we really did need to listen far more than we had previously to communities who've been less well served by the sport and physical activity sector, and absolutely to understand that is the depth of understanding that will drive change. Also, you know, clearly we have 2 years now nearly coming up to the very sad anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and the impact that that had seismically, not just in terms of the outrage, but also the demand for action that created across the globe and in every organization and in every part of our community. And actually, I reflect on that because the Minister has already mentioned the Tackling Racism and Racial Inequality in Sport report that we published last year with the other sports councils, and I'll touch on a bit later. That report came from an acknowledgement and a recognition that if we were going to have a credible response to that moment in time, if we were going to be genuine in our belief that we could do something to improve the lives for Black, brown people in this community, then we absolutely had to start with an understanding of the problem and the challenges that we faced. And I think that acknowledgement was really key to where Travis came from. It's also very importantly for Sport England, just over a year since Uniting the Movement was launched, a 10-year decade strategy to enable us to make significant systemic change in a way that we believe would benefit people across our communities in terms of living happier and healthier lives. And indeed, you know, the Travis report is now 7-8 months old, and we published an update just before Christmas, but there's a lot happening as a result of that I can touch on. So all of that is context, but actually the real context is to go back to what happened just after the BSL, the lockdown that started with the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic that we've seen so starkly. As we were building through 2019, we already acknowledged as an organization, as a sector, that there was inequality in terms of the provision of sport and activity in this country, but that actually across the board, we were seeing levels of activity improve and increase, and levels of inactivity decrease. And I think that that was at least a sign of some progress. What the pandemic has done, not only has it, you know, sort of put a halt on some of that general increase, but it has made those inequalities that already existed starkly worse. And I think that is the challenge that we need to currently accept. If I give you very broad brush data, because I know that data is a big part of this morning's session. Across the whole population in you know, as of May 21, the active lives that we published at the end of last year, about 2/3, 61% of adults overall were active or classed as active. That's doing 150 minutes of physical activity a week. Among the white British population, that was around about the same, 63% in fact registered. Among our Black population, it was 52%, and among the Asian population, it was 48%. So you can start to see there that a year's worth of the pandemic had created a stark inequality in relation to the overall levels. And actually the thing that strikes me the most is that over the pandemic, in the period that we've measured, whilst the activity levels of white British people fell just 1.5%, across the Black and Asian communities, it was 4.8%. So those are numbers, but they tell a real powerful story. And the same indeed is true among our children and young people. And so the context is absolutely necessary for us to address in terms of the numbers, the data, what it's showing us in terms of activity levels. But as the Minister also mentioned, there's a continued prevalence of racism in sport that are also having a very negative impact. We've seen, of course, in football, whether it was post the Euros or in other examples, but I think cricket has really brought it to the fore in the last months. The scandalous treatment, frankly, of Azim Rafiq in Yorkshire, but the issues that have come from that, and indeed we've got a huge moment in a couple of days' time, recognising that it's not only in the dressing rooms, but also in the boardrooms of sport where this change is needed. But there's one statistic, just one more statistic from me that I thought actually tells an underlying story, that the South Asian representation, whilst pretty high in terms of the community game, among coaching staff in the first class counties is under 5%. So if you've got the coaches at that level, then you do realise absolutely the challenge that people will face in feeling welcome and engaged across sport. So that's the context that we face, and that's the context that Sport England is working towards in terms of, as the Minister mentioned, uniting the movement's ambition. We believe at core that when we move, we're stronger, that the purpose of our work is to create the opportunities for people to enjoy the lifelong benefits of playing sport and being active, and in doing so, create a happier and healthier nation. And the mission, unequivocally, of uniting the movement is a determination, therefore, to tackle the deep-rooted inequalities and unlock the advantages of sport and physical activity for everyone. Because we acknowledge then and we acknowledge now that it's not a level playing field. Now, we continued to give focus to investments and programs that can support that ambition, and particularly to support culturally diverse communities. For example, the Minister mentioned the Together Fund, which started life as the Tackling Inequalities Fund during the pandemic. The £20 million investment that we made then was twofold, really, in its importance. One, it was the money, the fact that we were dedicating that resource towards communities who needed our help the most. But it was also how we chose to work with that fund, that it was not direct or open. It was actually us working with trusted partners, including Sporting Equals, to enable us to reach people in a way that actually made sense to them and targeted people who are most in need. And I think we have, as an organisation, have learned a huge amount, therefore, from the Together Fund and its impact. So much so that, as Nigel mentioned, we've doubled the funding in it as a programme. But also the way that we now see how we work and how we engage and how we invest being shaped by the realization that it's often trusted partners who can help us reach organizations and indeed reach individuals in a way that we nationally simply can't. So there is another second phase there, and we're bringing forward with that a number of new partners who previously we perhaps haven't worked with a recognition, and I think there's a depth in this that I can't possibly go into, but a recognition that the intersectionality of all of this, the various factors that influence people's lives and their ability to be active, absolutely need to be addressed. There's a couple of other programs that I would like to highlight just in terms of how we are seeking to work. You talk about cricket, you can also see on the other side of the fence some of the positive work that's now going on to engage people at both a community and elite level. And we've been delighted to work with Ebony Rainford Brent and others around the ACE programme that started life in Surrey County Cricket Club and is now branching out. We've given funding of just over £500,000 to the ACE programme for the next 3 years for them to work around London, Birmingham and Bristol. And it's a programme that I think is really effectively targeted in its ambition, looking to respond to the decline of the Black British professional players by as much as 75%, and the recognition that less than 1% are playing cricket at recreational level. Then you can also look at organisations that we know we need to work with and be different for. Specific partners, for example, like the Black Swimming Association, which has grown up really effectively in the last couple of years, somebody who we engaged initially during the strategy consultation, actually, and we're now solicited a bid from to support them directly in relation to their aquatic development work and the contribution that particularly they're making. I know Jeff is going to talk about the Birmingham Games, but thinking about the legacy work around the Aquatic Centre and that part of Birmingham, the West Midlands. So we need more partners and more organisations that can help shape our work, like the BSA. And lastly, and I want to come on to the point around the code and how we can effect positive change. We've been working for a number of years now with Perrett Laver, the recruitment consultancy, who many of you will know, have created a programme for us to develop the opportunity for people from culturally diverse communities to join the boards of sports organisations and be effectively positioned as candidates in that process. It was born out of a recognition that we simply weren't doing enough to enable that to happen. We're seeing positive change already. The last set of figures that were audited last year showed that that representation had jumped from 4% to 8%. That's still not enough. And we do hope that when we come to the audited figures for this year, we'll see a jump certainly into double figures. But that programme is one that we're very proud to continue to support because it's actually making a difference where it's needed most. But I think my point in the keynote and my remaining time is that actually it's more than just programmes from our point of view that will make the difference. We do need to recognise that it's actually a systemic challenge and systemic change that's needed. So the Minister mentioned the Tackling Racism and Racial Inequality in Sport work that we published last year. We did that jointly with the other sports councils, as he mentioned. We looked both at the data, working with Sheffield Hallam University, and also crucially to listen to and understand the lived experience of people in our community through work with AKD Solutions. And I'm delighted actually that we've continued to work now with that group of people to affect our work more closely. But Travis really showed for us the way that we could start to embed effectively across our work some real key learnings. It was about our own structures and systems, and I'm looking to change that within Sport England as a result, in part, of some of the findings there. Absolutely that we need to improve the representation at leadership level of people from culturally diverse communities. Indeed, across the workforce, there's an absence of representation, but also an absence of data. And I think that's something that's coming to the fore, not least with the Race Representation Index that Sporting Equals is speaking about today. And lastly, that we do need to think very much about how we invest. I mentioned the Together Fund, that it's not just about assuming that communities who previously felt excluded from Sport England and accessing our resources actually suddenly will magically become so. We need to think about working differently and investing differently to support our ambition. So understanding that from the Travis work has been really, really important. I think what Travis has also showed us, and particularly the lived experience, that really we need to rebuild, or in some cases build for the first time, a level of trust that we are actually serious in this ambition, that we believe in the benefits that can accrue, and more importantly, we understand the need to work and behave differently, both as an organisation, as a sector, if we're going to tackle the challenges that we face. And so to conclude, it's really to go back to uniting the movement and to bring to life for you, I hope, 3 areas where I think this is happening, but also where I hope that the partners on this call can feel very, very much engaged, involved, and help us in creating the solutions we seek. One is to mention the Code for Sports Governance. It was mentioned by the Minister, but it's an actually fundamentally powerful tool at our disposal. Every funded body from Sport England and indeed from UK Sport now is required to have a diversity inclusion action plan that is published and demonstrates what they are doing, not only to address some of the challenges in leadership that they face, but also to create more awareness, both within their organisation and within their sector, and more powerfully to cascade that down within their sporting and organisational structures. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face, that we're seeking to address with the code this time around, is how can we get national level change to then be affected at regional and county levels in particular. Secondly, we've learned a lot through our local delivery pilots about working locally and doing things differently. A big tranche of our implementation of Uniting the Movement is the belief that we need to meet people where they're at. And our lessons from our place-based work are such that we know we need to expand on that, and will be significantly in the next few years as we invest in places and we invest in organizations who understand the communities which we're trying to reach and can be trusted in their ability to deliver. And then lastly, again, mentioned by the Minister, a very fundamental shift, quite radical shift, in fact, in the way we work with key partners. Over the last few months, we've been finalising and indeed announcing a level of investment in what we've described as system partners, about 130 or so organisations, and over 5 years, about £500 million of National Lottery and Exchequer money in organisations' ability to deliver that foundational role to help us make and effect change. And I think it's really important that within that, every organisation that's been successful in their application has had to demonstrate their commitment to our agenda and their commitment to change, and particularly the work that they will do to show impact on tackling inequality. And I think from my point of view, that brings me to Sporting Equals and why I was so keen and pleased to be invited to address this event today. Because I do think the role that Sporting Equals has as a system partner is a really good example of the sort of ambition that we have to work with others, to work through others, to listen, to understand, and not simply to tell when it comes to the delivery of our ambition and our strategy. Because I think as a system partner, Sporting Equals can absolutely help us to deliver improved practice, to challenge leadership commitments, and to provide guidance and advice to the sector, to advocate and campaign, as we've seen even this morning, and also with things like the Charter, which we're very pleased to continue to support, to provide data and evidence. Of course, the Race Representation Index that I know Emma's speaking about later is an example of how that can happen. Travis has shown us too, indeed, that the current lack of baseline data across sport, and particularly in some areas, not least the coaching and other professional workforce, actually is a loss to our ambition to change. And therefore, using the system partner role to engage with the sector to gather insight is a really powerful tool. And lastly, to take the language of our implementation plan, helping us to build this movement through bringing together community-led partnerships and networks, through common purpose, through common ambition, and absolutely to understand that unless we tackle those inequalities that are so prevalent, that recognise in every bit of the sporting sector are there preventing people from having a happier life, a healthier life, and actually feeling the benefit of playing sport and being active, then unless we do that together, we will never affect the sort of change that we are ambitious to do over the next decade. So thank you for the opportunity to address you today, Michelle, Denzine. Thank you to everyone. I know that Aaron's following me shortly, and I'm very keen to listen to him. I'm very sincere myself personally in my commitment to this. As an organisation, we are driven by a belief that when we move, we're stronger, and that everyone should have the right to play sport, to be active, and live a happier and healthier life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. It was really good to hear your perspectives, and I know your commitment to this work. I think I have to reflect on some of the things that you were talking about there in terms of who gets the money. If we think about the strategy and the context of what you've provided for us today, and in light of what the Minister said, this idea that money is going to be distributed to ethnically diverse communities in a more equitable way is something that I really want to just question, because before I came on today, as I always do, I speak to those community grassroots organisations on the ground that are actually doing the pioneering work. And one of the things that was reflected back to me is the fact that the equality and the race equality aspect of sports organisations, of government saying they're committed to the issues, but then that money not actually reaching some of those grassroots organisations in the way it could and should to mobilise them to be able to develop their infrastructure to use the money effectively. So I kind of want to reflect that to you. Also, that I do want to make a point that actually it is a shame that it took the racist murder of George Floyd for us to get to this point. And actually we need to see the action and the mobilization of a lot of this strategy at a faster rate with greater transparency around the accountability aspects of that.
Thanks, Michelle. I mean, I don't disagree with that last point particularly. I think that the way that I would respond is to reflect on the sincerity of two things. One is that through, for example, the Together Fund, we've realized and acknowledged that there are organizations out there who are better placed than we are to understand how best to reach the people you're mentioning, and finding direct routes through to them is really, really key. So, you know, I can think of a number of organizations that we've used there who either we will give the trust, if you like, to reach out to individuals and local groups and understand that they're best placed, not us, to understand, to get to those communities. So we'll continue down that route with our funding, and we're looking, I mean, this is quite a structural point, but we're looking to transform how we make our funding available in an open sense, because we recognize at the moment too often it's exclusive, or it's very hard, or it's very reliant on resource or capacity, and actually we need to be better at that than we've been previously. But actually the only point I make is that one thing that will take time is an acknowledgement that systemic change is needed. That's what we've seen from the evidence base, and that's why I point to three things. I think absolutely understanding that we need to work better in place, because top-down solutions from a national level are only ever going to affect a certain degree of people. Working actually locally, meeting people where they're at, understanding that it's the communities themselves that are best placed to understand need and actually what will be of most benefit. Expanding that place-based program is going to be a really fundamental part of how we're going to work in the years ahead. That actually it's leaders of organizations who can most affect change. So the diversity and inclusion action plans that are contained within the Code for Sports Governance requirements are very powerful tools for us to change leadership and to get more representation across our all of the underrepresented groups in our community, so that actually we have fairer, more equitable decision-making within the organizations. And then lastly, I think it's ultimately about change from within. We absolutely acknowledge that system partners are still in many cases traditional organizations within sport. But the fact of the matter is we have to work with and through those organizations too, and it's how we position our money. So unequivocally, and there will be many governing body, for example, representatives on this call, or maybe organizations from active partners, unequivocally our resource now is there, but it's to be used in a way that tackles inequality, that is against our mission and our ambition, and is absolutely geared towards us being able to demonstrate that effective change. So I acknowledge the point about pace and speed. There's a lot of work that we're trying to do quickly, but actually this systemic change now is the realization. And to quote, I think, you know, people that have spoken to me, if we're going to have trust in Sport England and other organizations like us, then we have to co-create. We have to acknowledge that we don't have the answers, we don't have the solutions, and that does take time.
Thanks very much, Tim. The point that I take from that as well is that actually the great leadership that's needed too, in also taking the kind of, if you like, doing the heavy lifting around this work in a way that hasn't been done before. So thank you for having being very open and transparent and having that engaging conversation with us. We do appreciate it. So moving on, I want to now introduce Aaron Kang. Aaron needs no introduction really. He is the CEO of Sporting Equals, who has been leading the work around race equality for a number of years. He is the founder of the British Ethnic Diversity Sports Awards and the leaderboard, and he is going to be taking us through the key presentation for today that looks at the state of the sector. And there'll be significant numbers of you on this call who have deliberately tuned in to hear what's currently happening within the sector. So thank you very much for Aaron for making this such a priority for Sporting Equals, and we look forward to your presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. I'm going to run through a few slides to help you get a good picture of the current state of play of race equality in the sector. High-profile issues of racism in sport over the past year have been visceral reminders that sport is more often than not an unwelcome space for ethnically diverse communities, which understandably does not instill much confidence, trust, or inspiration to these already disengaged and inactive communities, let alone families allowing their loved ones to work towards playing sport at the highest level and watching them receive the abuse and hatred that they have worked so hard to protect them from. The important underpinning issue here is a culture of systemic racism in sport, which can only be unlearned through stronger commitment to anti-racist initiatives and organisational cultural change, a major commitment for any CEO or organisation, but that is the only way change will come. My next few slides focus on inactivity rates of ethnically diverse communities. And this slide shows the trend over the last 5 years of at least 150 minutes of physical activity per week of adults. Largely, the figures have not increased in terms of participation from Black and Asian groups who persistently remain least active. Both groups reflect the impact of the pandemic on their levels of activity. To reiterate the impact of the pandemic on ethnically diverse communities, let's look at the impact on children and young people. The data here clearly shows the impact of pandemic lockdowns and restrictions across 2020 and 21. But overall, the largest drops in physical activity were experienced by boys from Black and Asian communities. On this slide, we focus on female activity, which shows Asian and Black communities being least active during the full year of May 2020 to May 2021. People from Black and Asian ethnic groups who reported having a disability or long-term health condition were the least active during May 2021. And last year, we also watched the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics and were mesmerized by some of the great achievements of the athletes. One thing was very clear was representation at the level is not as much as it should be. The Youth Charter completed an analysis of representation of Team GB athletes from Sydney 2000 through to Tokyo 2020. UK sport had invested an unprecedented 1.3 billion in Team GB over this period. However, despite this public investment, most of Team GB sports have had very few or no ethnically diverse athletes. When reflecting historically, we can see there have been fluctuations in the representation of South Asian communities within Team GB. Though nominal at best, this lack of representation seemed to drop even more in the most recent games, where there appeared to be no South Asians present in Team GB for the Tokyo Olympics, and only one athlete of South Asian descent in the Paralympics, Ayush Butta, who incidentally won a gold medal in wheelchair rugby. In research conducted by Sport Equals with South Asian associate member organisations, 88% of our respondents agreed that there should be more South Asian representation on Team GB. Over half felt sad, disgusted, or shocked by the apparent lack of South Asian representation on Team GB. 3/4 of South Asian organisations that responded to the survey felt their service users would attend more stadium sport as spectators if there was more South Asian representation. And over 90% agreed that their service users would be more inspired to participate in sport if more role models looked like them. This brings me on to the decision makers in sport, who lead on interventions and strategies to increase participation and widen the pool of talent available to sport. 93% of the workforce in sport is white. Only 2% of sports coaches are Black or Asian, and 95% of leisure and sports managers are white. Focusing on boardrooms of sport, only 6.5% of national governing body board members are ethnically diverse compared to the National Census 2011 demographic of at least 14%. Sporting Equals believes workforce data is absolutely critical in knowing the profile of senior leaders who make the key decisions in sport, for example, senior coaches, senior leadership teams, and the boardrooms of sport. If we're going to make real change in our sector for race equality, we need to see where the gaps are in the knowledge banks of our organisations that are leading diversity, equity and inclusion. For example, empathy to understanding the challenges facing ethnically diverse communities in sport, and where there's enough expertise or wider stakeholder relationships within senior management for impactful interventions to increase wider participation and promotion of the sport. The Race Representation Index was developed as we believe there was a correlation between low numbers of ethnically diverse communities in sport participation and talent pathways due to the interventions being developed by decision makers who are predominantly white and lack understanding and expertise in tackling the challenges facing ethnically diverse communities, hence the lack of progress made in representation across the workforce and elite teams in sport. The Race Representation Index survey was piloted by Queen's Park Rangers Football Club and launched in October 2021. The Race Representation Index is intended to provide a point of reference as to how individual publicly funded NGBs of sport are performing against the data of ethnically diverse populations. It encourages organisations to collect data around the ethnicity of their senior roles and elite sporting positions. This index is in place to support NGBs on their journey to race equality and publicly show the progress they are making on the back of positive commitments they have already made. Data is collected in 4 key areas: senior coaches, players and athletes, senior leadership, and board membership. I am very proud to say that the sports sector has embraced the Race Representation Index survey and have understood its importance for supporting NGBs on their journey to race equality and ethnically diversified representation at every level. For the inaugural Race Representation Index 2021, 52 NGBs of sport were invited to participate, and 90% of NGBs were in contact with us about the index, and our response rate was 75%. Based on the data submitted, England Handball, Basketball England, and GB Taekwondo were all graded an A. I would like to congratulate the 3 NGBs who received an A. Organisations cannot be complacent even with an A, as a change in grade can take place with one individual from an ethnically diverse background leaving the team. And so it's important to continue to engage and attract ethnically diverse talent. Please also note that the census we used was 2011 and not 2021, as that data is not available at the moment. The average overall grade for NGBs participating in 2021 Race Representation Index is a D. If we focus on senior leadership, the average grade for board membership was a C. The average grade for senior management and leadership teams is an E. The average grade in the criterion of senior coaches is an E. And incidentally, there were no CEOs reported as being from an ethnically diverse background on any NGB. For more detailed information on the first ever Race Representation Index survey, and for more recommendations for change, then please go to our website where you can access the full report. Ultimately, NGB should consider their performance on the RRI as a reference point as to how they're performing and how they can improve their performance in the area of ethnically diverse representation in their workforce. NGBs can use the ethnicity data they've collected to review and develop strategies to engage ethnically diverse communities. Before I complete my presentation, I'd like to take the opportunity to present some highlights of the year we've had at Sporting Equals. As I've just mentioned, we created the groundbreaking Race Representation Index that focuses on representation at senior leadership level. We have also been pivotal as a distribution funder for funders such as Comet Relief and Sport England, enabling many ethnically diverse community sports organisations to survive following the hit of the pandemic. To date, we have distributed close to £800,000. And if organisations would like to tap into this fund, then please contact Sporting Equals. Our research has continued to support the sector, including research into participation experiences of Black women and physical activity. We also have developed the pioneering Race Discrimination Support Service, which will in future support the victims of race discrimination, giving our communities a safe space to report the incidences and work with our legal partners, Bishop, Lloyd and Jackson. And we'll be hoping for more partners. And if there are more legal partners out there who'd like to support Sporting Equals, then please be in touch. We have also delivered our innovative leadership program to future leaders of sport from ethnically diverse backgrounds. This includes our Leaderboard Academy that partners with the University of Leicester and Leicester City Football Club. We have delivered many community projects across the country, bringing sport to our communities through project delivery. We have signed up over 70 sports organisations to the Sporting Eagles Race Equality Charter. This includes many national governing bodies of sport. And this charter will help work towards changing organisational culture. And finally, we have seen huge steps taken by the sector to respect and relate to ethnically diverse communities by being more specific in terminology and to cease the use of the term BAME, B-A-M-E. Over the next year, we intend to carry on championing race equality in sport with the support of our partners. The Race Discrimination Support Service will be operational in May 2022. The third cohort of Leaderboard Academy have graduated, and we are now accepting applications for our fourth cohort, so please go to our website for more details. We will continue with the Race Representation Index for 2022 and hopefully widening the survey further. We'll be launching our very own podcast, so keep an eye out for Sporting Equals Talks. We will also continue to deliver, monitor and analyse our local projects to ensure we are having the impact we expect on the ground. We will conduct further research into ethnically diverse communities and share the findings widely. We will work in partnership with, support and challenge, when needed, sector partners to ensure that ethnically diverse communities can participate in sport and physical activity at their chosen level. And finally, we will continue with our Sporting Equals Charter to help the sector improve its work in race equality and engage in ethnically diverse communities. Finally, I would like to thank my board who brings so much diversity of thought into our organisation and have supported the team by having the empathy on the challenges facing ethnically diverse communities and ensuring we have the impact to move the dial in race equality across sport and physical activity sector. That's it from me. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That's given us such a great insight into the current reality and the data in terms of race equality across the sector, and lays out some of the gaps and where the accountability should lie. So some key information there. I'd encourage you to go to the Sporting Equals website and download the Race Representation Index and really get to grips with some of those figures. Now we're back. We're going to have a presentation from Yasmin Haroon, BEM, the chair of and founder of the Muslim Sports Association, and she's the vice chair for Inactivity on the British Asians in Sport and Physical Activity Board, BASPA for short. And she's going to be talking to us about the impact of their work over the last year. Over to you, Yasmin.
Hi everyone, my name is Yasmin Haroon, Vice Chair of BASPA Advisory Board. The BASPA Advisory Board is now in its third year and continue to advocate on behalf of British South Asian communities in sport and physical activity. I am pleased to see the development of the board, who are getting more media attention and also gaining momentum in advocating on behalf of British South Asian communities. It is really important that as a board, we continue to be the voice of those who feel they do not have one. And when people do feel the courage to speak out, that we support them in any way we can. The BASPA Advisory Board devised and produced a video series which was shared across social media during South Asian Heritage Month. This included profiling BASPA Advisory Board members Haj Bania OBE at British Wheelchair Basketball, Manisha Taylor, who will be joining us later for the Q&A panel, who is currently at QPR FC, and myself, Amadip Khadija Sheikh and Reha Ullah, in our capacity as coaches at Muslim Sports Association. Sporting Equals also took part in various initiatives organised by the founders of South Asian Heritage Month, including a roundtable discussion on South Asian women in sport an area I am incredibly passionate about. Sporting Equals Chief Executive Aaron Kang OBE was also invited to do a podcast on Our Game too, taking a deep dive into the upbringing and journey through sport and ED&I. As a system partner for both Comic Relief and Sport England, Sporting Eagles has also been able to distribute vital funding to dozens of South Asian-led community organisations, providing sport and physical activity to our communities, with over 60% of funds going directly towards encouraging physical activity amongst British South Asian communities across all areas of sport. 63% of organisations funded through Sporting Equals grant distribution were South Asian-led and/or had a majority of South Asian service users. Following discussions from the advisory board, a pulse survey was also carried out to take a deep dive in the lack of South Asian representation in elite sport and to determine opinion on the lack of South Asian participation in Olympic level under Team GB. The advisory board are regularly approached for media comment on sporting events and issues impacting South Asian communities. We have made comments regarding Islamophobia in grassroots football. The studies show that Islamophobia is increasing, which needs to be addressed by the industry as a whole before it gets too late. Racist abuse towards South Asians from grassroots to elite level, such as Sati Balaguru, as shown in the slide. We also celebrated South Asians in football and amplifying their talent, and the lack of South Asian representation in Team GB. As ever, if any British South Asian-led organisation would like to join BASPA Network, please get in touch directly with Sporting Equals, and to keep up to date with any activity via the Sporting Equals social media activity. Thank you.
A big thanks to Yashmin there, really key update for us. I hope that that was informative for you. We are an hour in. I'm hoping that you are taking notes, that you are thinking about this within the context of your environment, within the context of your organisation, what it means for you. I just took the opportunity to stand up and sit down. I am a sports person. I'm just giving myself a shake. I'm inviting you to do the same so that you can get the blood flowing. So we keep moving on through our agenda. And this is one of my favourite parts, actually. As a host, I get to introduce sporting royalty. And as a netballer myself, it's a real joy to introduce Amma Agbezi, who's an international netball player, former England captain, incredible player over a number of years. She holds a number of trustee positions and board positions in sport. And she's also on the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games Organising Committee, and she chairs the Athletes Advisory Committee. We're very lucky to have Amma with us today, and she's going to be taking us through some of the context of the Race Representation Index and why the Sports Monitoring Advisory Panel developed it alongside Sporting Equals. So let's go over to Amma now.
Hi. My name's Amma Agbezi, and I'm a member of the Sports Monitoring Advisory Panel. Established in January 2021 with a focus on Black African and Black Caribbean communities in the UK. Following the death of George Floyd, several sporting organisations made pledges to improve the experiences of ethnically diverse communities. The panel serves to ensure those commitments are upheld and looks at what actions are being put in place in order to achieve them. The panel meets bi-monthly and discusses the state of the sector, the Race Representation Index, and invites key stakeholders such as Sport England and organisations primarily focused on Black African and Black Caribbean communities as guest speakers. Now, you may think that a prerequisite of being part of the panel is to be young and extremely photogenic. I assure you this is not the case. The panel is comprised of aspirational, experienced and talented individuals. Chaired by Densine White, the panel also consists of Chris Ramsey, MBE, Kadina Cox, MBE, Devon Malcolm, MBE, Maggie Alfonsi, MBE, Rodney Hines, Alexandra Rickham, Harley Hicks, Fiona May, and myself. There are also two special advisors to the panel, being Aaron Kang, OBE, CEO of Sporting Equals, and Emeritus Professor Kevin Hines, Leeds Beckett University. The panel looked at previous initiatives operating in the USA and recognised a gap in the UK sports sector with the lack of consistent ethnicity data collection. After much research, consultation and discussion, alongside Sporting Equals, the panel announced, launched and administered the Rates Representation Index. The Rates Representation Index acts as a method of measuring and monitoring sport and physical activity organisations against progress with the race equality agenda, with particular focus on ethnic representation. The index tasks sports organisations with ensuring that they collect ethnicity data for coaches, players, senior staff, and board members. Without the collection of data and a baseline, it's impossible to monitor sporting organisations' progress towards ethnic diversity and racial parity. Data should be collected as a given. How else are we to know what improvements are required and how to foster an environment for positive change? Since its launch, the Rates Representation Index has had much media traction, including from Sky Sports, online digital media, The Voice, and CNN. I know I don't need to preach to the converted, but sport has incredible power. It can enhance the health and well-being of people. It can support communities to collectively achieve more, and it can ultimately change the lives of so many people for the better. That should be available to everybody. Currently, sport is not representative of the UK population. The ethnicity gap exists across grassroots to the elite, from the entire workforce to volunteers, from boards to the media, including online and primetime TV. The Sporting Equals Charter is a simple yet effective framework which enables us to collectively work towards sport and physical activity sector representative and inclusive of the entire UK population. It combines three simple but key principles. These are to capture data and insight, to commit to tackling underrepresentation at all levels, and to celebrate positive role models and stories. Athletes focus on data and stats in order to consistently improve and strive to be the best that they can be. The Rates Representation Index is exactly the same, but for national governing bodies and sporting organisations. You can sign up to the Sporting Equals Charter to help us improve the ethnicity gap and tackle systemic racism and ensure that sport in the UK is for everybody. Thanks.
A massive thanks to Amma, because I think it really captures the importance and the context of what we've been talking about, and also those three: commit, celebrate, and capture. Well, I've said them in the wrong order, but capture, commit and celebrate of the charter are really your framework around how to establish and deliver race equity and race equality within sport and physical activity. So thanks very much to Amma for that, and also just thanks to some of you that have actually made comments and questions on the chat. I would encourage you to use that. So thank you, Navjit, thank you, Raza, thank you, Fiona. We will endeavour to get back to you on those questions, and I'll see if I can weave some of those into the panel later on. And also we'll be sending those through to those organisations and the leaders of organisations who can be and should be doing the heavy lifting around some of the work around this. So let's move on now. So thank you very much to Amma. We're going to move on to our keynote, and I'd like to introduce Jeff Thompson. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeff Thompson, MBE, FRSA, DL, and the Deputy Chair of Birmingham 2022. But importantly, as an athlete, I always want to get this in, he's a former 5 times world karate champion, sports administrator, politician, very well known. He's a founder of and chair of the Youth Charter, which is a UK-based international charity and a United Nations NGO, which uses the ethics of sport and culture and digital activities to really tackle social inequalities. He has a number of public and private appointments, including that of the Deputy Chair at the Commonwealth Games England, and all of the work at Birmingham 2022. So we are really happy to have Jeff with us today. Over to Jeff Thompson.
Michelle, morning, and thank you for introducing me. And more importantly, I'd like to thank Sporting Equals for the opportunity to contribute to this major event. Like all experiences with race, inequality, and the ability, as I just make myself presentable, in all aspects of our everyday lives, so much of this is so personal and professional. It resonates, it reflects, and with opportunities like this, we're able to, I think, recommit and rededicate, as well as address the challenges that we still face and the opportunities that we still need to provide. I had some slides I was going to share with you, but I'm going to save them as part of something you can reflect on once I've finished, because I believe, like in so many experiences, the interactive age sees us really able to engage with hearts and minds, words that will inspire, hopefully challenge and motivate what we still need to do to provide hope and opportunity. What I'm hoping you will accept our young people, our wider community, and society as a whole. I'm going to share with you a story. I'm then going to share with you a challenge, and then I'm going to leave you with an opportunity, because I think everything that reflects my incredible journey from the streets to the stadiums, occasionally the rostrums, but back to the streets that have seen me serve in sports administration and public life in the 38+ years, which in itself betrays the very notion and nature of what I would certainly share with Denzine White as the chair of Sporting Equals, would suggest we are the products of sport for all. And I realize that I'm becoming an endangered species when I make those comments of wisdom. But the applied and lived experience reflects that journey from the streets, where the National Front and postcode rivalry would have been the very challenges to me taking up a combat sport in karate, because at that time, my mental, physical, emotional health and well-being was simply to defend myself. There was no sporting ambition. However, I was inspired and shaped by a global sporting number of icons who would give me the ability to be ambitious and to realize my potential. Those medals of which produced through me as a product of sport for all and the equitably diverse and inclusive nature of the times very much saw more diversity and inclusion then than there is now. And I say that to you because with all of the commitments, all of the resources, and all of the effort, we still do not see our young people and communities at all levels of the sporting ecosystem enjoy a more equitably diverse and inclusive reflection, representation of society. And I believe that sport reflects society and therefore influences society. Those 80s through to the 90s saw me serve as the third face that would look like us on the GB Sports Council. I served 11 years of incredible experiences where the truth to power, sometimes seen as an offense, but certainly not a crime, but the potential bad boy made good, certainly suggested that on the opportunity that came out of adversity, if there were not riots then, I wouldn't have been able to sit at that table. Equally, if George Floyd had not taken place, would I be still speaking to you now? Because we all know that this journey can exhaust. It can burn you out. It can take you to profoundly dark places of self-reflection and personal challenge. But in all of that, I contributed and saw much in the Racial Equality Advisory Group that led to Sporting Equals being the legacy of those 11 years, something that I'm always effective, and certainly with Professor Kevin Hilton, those of that generation who simply provided what we see now, the consistent ability to challenge in all the right and appropriate ways. And I think the Race Representation Index is an excellent way of presenting the work that we have done, the work that we need to do, but more importantly, the institutions and the systemic culture that needs to change. We know that George Floyd was a watershed moment, but in major games and their ability to accelerate and promote the ability to deliver more equitably diverse and inclusive opportunities, it is back in 1993 when Manchester were bidding for major games, the failed 2000 Olympic bid, but in that time, the shooting of a 14-year-old schoolboy on the streets of Moss Side, an area of historical deprivation and disadvantage. His name was Benji Stanley. There was also the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the loss of life of James Bulger. They happened within months of that year of 1993. I went back on the streets and challenged those upon the table of power I sat around, and a youth charter was born. All I would say to you is, it's the great, wonderful thing about the interactive digital age of information to simply click on the youth charter will tell you what can have happened by way of tragedy, providing a global movement of opportunity. And I will not rest on those laurels because it is there for everyone to see. Last week, as we celebrated, but not so much celebrated, I think acknowledged and recognized 29 years of work, locally, nationally, and internationally, it almost challenged me to represent what I would share with you, because in all of that, that personal, professional commitment and witnessing so much in the institutions of sport and the systemic cultures that still exist, the reason that the bidding, hosting, and legacy of major games, and as we now acknowledge and celebrate 10 years since London 2012, Team GB inspiring a generation, what many accept has not worked, has not succeeded, because we're not cohesive, we're not integrated, we don't work as a collaboration. Even within our own diversity, we're encouraged to compete against one another rather than collaborate. And the power of collaboration is what major games provide. Since that time, Glasgow have hosted the Commonwealth Games, and the Youth Charter, visibly but invisibly, continues to play its role, but always mindful of when we do not succeed, the impact and cost to the lives of the young people that we are absolutely, I believe, committed to and responsible to. We only have to look, as well as representation in sport, the impact it's had on society, the reports in light of COVID and post-COVID that shows the disproportionate overrepresentation in the mental, physical, emotional health, ill-being, not well-being, they're ill in that wellness. And that reflects educationally within our communities and sees that disaffection and disadvantage, see lives lost, not only to the graveyard, but to the universities of crime, not realizing their full potential, not realizing the social, cultural, and economic benefit that they can contribute positively to this society and green and pleasant land. But the unpleasant nature is being able to have an honest discussion. And that truth to power is something we must still be dedicated to. Last year, I accepted the role of Deputy Chair of Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games because I believed it was a unifying opportunity to collaborate, form partnerships, re-establish, restore, reposition ourselves. In Sporting Equals, Racial Equality Charter, the alignment of a youth charter and how we would ensure that data and insight and background and information would add to that leadership, that representation that we see in the social grassroots development, performance and excellence. Because if we're going to conquer this challenge, we're going to have to do it together. The 2022 Birmingham Games is a game for everyone. The equality, diversity, inclusion focus with youth, community and legacy is an absolute first, foremost and uttermost requirement. Birmingham is one of the most diverse cities and youngest cities in Europe. It also houses very strong agencies such as Sporting Equals, and the Youth Charter has been there since the 2002 Commonwealth Games. So legacy is what we leave behind. It's the benefit of hope and opportunity that we must be committed to. We must do this because if we don't, nothing will happen, everyone. There is nothing that will be given to us. We must intellectually, intelligently, strategically challenge, integrate ourselves, because I believe inclusion allows others to exclude us. We deserve and have earned the right to be embedded. And the Minister for Sport, Nigel Huddleston, Tim Hollingsworth, Aaron Kang, and other leaders, for when we get diversity, as we saw with George Floyd, we get movement. The Youth Charter have a simple call to action: the recruitment, selection, and deployment of 10,000 social coaches in each of the major 10 cities where our people, our communities most reside. Then, and only then, can we engage, equip and empower 1 million young people, which equally reflect Birmingham 2022's pledge to engage, equip and empower 1 million children and young people just in Birmingham and the West Midlands. So there's a massive challenge, but with leveling the playing field, Sporting Equals, ourselves and others, this is a challenge that we can meet. This is a challenge we have to succeed on. I must admit, whenever I come to gatherings of this kind, I learn something new. So the systemic partners that Sport England have announced will see millions invested. But let's not see us isolated. I say now for the record, Black organisations in sports development is not the way forward. We must be integrated. We must be allowed to play our part, because we will more than hold our own when we're allowed to become sport for everyone, a games for everyone, and sport for all. If we build back better and restore our communities, these collaborations and partnerships are critical. And basically, my fellow board member chairing that athletes commission will see 10,000 of the Commonwealth sportsmen and women and officials descend on Birmingham. But please do not believe that that motivation and inspiration will lie there. There is much that Birmingham are doing as an organising committee. There's much that the City Council and many are doing, but we need you collectively working with us. So when we go into our communities, when we build relationships of trust, confidence and respect, we are able to do what many said we could not do and what we're committed to do. The late President Mandela, who used political genius to build hope and opportunity post-apartheid, stated that sport and the arts must be the vaccine and antidote. I was fortunate to contribute to the vision for sport, and I brought back Ubuntu. I brought it back to our communities. But I believe that I have lost. Many will know that in losing you learn much, but we cannot fail because there are too many lives that have been lost that look like us, that should haunt us and inspire us. So, vision without action is but a dream. Action without a vision is merely passing time. Vision with action can change the world. It is our world to play our part, to see social grassroots development, performance and excellence reflected in these games, now I'm told 123 days before the opening ceremony. See us build hope and opportunity where we can all represent a rich heritage and ancestry and a legacy opportunity for all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Jeff. There was so much in your keynote. We are very thankful to you. It was, I know, reflected in some of the comments, really empowering and really kind of visionary in all kinds of ways, as well as challenging to the leaders of sport and physical activity. So thank you for that. We are very appreciative, and vision with action can indeed change the world. And so on that arousing note, we are going to now move on with our agenda, and we get to the panel, our Q&A panel. So I'm really excited for this part of our program today, because we hear from the lived experiences of former athletes, of administrators and of leaders in sport who are making their change. So without further ado, our panel will be joining us today, and we will have the first person, the first athlete we will be talking to today is Fiona May. So Fiona is, we're really lucky to have Fiona. She's based in Italy, and she is an Olympian, and she is a track and field long jumper, and she is a former British athlete, has 3 world titles, and from the Olympic Games, silver medals, and she's had a number of international governance and leadership roles across international sport, including working as the 4th chairwoman actually for the UEFA Commission of Fair Play, the UEFA Children's Foundation, a board member at Puma, and she sits on the Sports Monitoring Advisory Panel for Sporting Equals. And so I'm just looking for Fiona on our screen right now, and she doesn't seem to be here, which is absolutely what I said may happen at the top of the event today. This is how the digital world works. She may have dropped off. So what we're going to do is we are going to move into Mandeep, and we'll come back to Fiona, because I'm putting that vision out there, because the visions will come true now that we've had Jeff's blessings on that. So Mandeep, do you mind going first? And lovely, there you are, Mandeep. Wonderful, great to see you. Thank you so much for stepping in. I want to just give you your dues, absolutely, in terms of your introduction, Mandeep. We're not going to go straight into it. So we're really lucky to have Paralympian Mandeep with us today, represented GB wheelchair rugby in 3 Olympics, in Beijing, in London and Rio. Real Olympic royalty here. Winning 3 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze medal at the International Wheelchair Rugby Federation. He works to support businesses with inclusion, specifically around acquired disabilities and mobility issues. You've just taken on, I understand, a trustee role at GB Wheelchair Rugby. And so we're really glad that you're here with us as a former athlete, but you're always a Paralympian, right? So when people say former, I'm never like down with that. You're always a Paralympian, and now in a leadership role within sport. So Mandeep, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for being a part of our panel today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. So it's been an amazing event so far, and really happy to share my views with you.
Wonderful. So Mandeep, one of the things that we have heard about, and it was mentioned by Tim actually at the top, around the aspects of how different elements of our identity and how we experience the intersections of oppression and discrimination in all kinds of ways. And it's something that the sport and physical activity sector needs to do better in terms of engaging with a variety of different communities to ensure that everybody is able to access sport. And as a South Asian para-athlete, there have undoubtedly been barriers that you would have faced. And I'd just like to ask you to share any of your experiences that you think would be useful for the different organisations, the community grassroots organisations, the leaders of the NGBs, the leaders of our charities would want to hear on this call. What have been some of those barriers that you've particularly experienced?
Yeah, so I guess the athlete in me will tell you I didn't have any barriers. There were just hurdles along the way.
Love it. You can talk in those sporting analogies, Mandeep, no problem.
Yeah, we face diversity every day in sport, and it's something you'll learn to deal with. But if I'm honest with you, I'll go back to the start of my career in 2000, just trying to convince my parents and my community, my friends, my family, that a career in sport was real. It was difficult. To them, I was given a very good career in engineering to chase a sport that they didn't really understand. And their viewpoint at that point was difficult, because there's not many South Asians in sport representing at elite level. So for you to try and justify your actions on moving on to a different career when you've worked so hard to do another career, that was one of the barriers I faced initially. But another one is breaking into a team. I was one of the first South Asians to take on wheelchair rugby, and just bringing your own culture and who I was difficult. I almost felt I had to hide who I was and what I was about initially, because I wanted to fit in around the team ethics. And it was a period where I guess casual racism was used in jest or in and around, and you had to accept it or move on. I wasn't really given the forum to speak about it or talk about it or do anything around it. I'm really glad to say our sport, especially world rugby, has grown leaps and bounds on that front. And through my successes, a lot of Asians have come into the sport. I think Aaron mentioned Ayaz, who medal at the 2020 Games, the first gold medal ever, which is an amazing achievement. But just being part of that movement from 2000 has been amazing.
There's so much in what you've said there, Mandeep. I'm just, that the issue around the kind of some of the family and the cultural dynamics that went with your participation, but also the kind of casual racism that you talked about there, and what the impact that would have had on you. Do you think that impacted your performance? And
yeah, definitely. I think as a young man growing up, it almost created fractures within the team, within certain people's. Not so much at a league, but at club level. You'd ever sort of, the kind of bridges that were built were broken because of those comments. You just felt like you were on the outside of things sometimes, and that definitely would have had an impact on performance. But I think for me, I grew over time, and I was able to share my culture and share who I was and make people understand what I was about, what made me tick. And by sharing your culture and who you are, you'll be able to, make new bridges with it all.
So again, it's as somebody who's experiencing the racism, having to then be that person to try to solve some of it within your particular context was a part of your experience.
Yeah, because I mean, at the point when I went through situations, it was, what would the outcome be if I spoke up? What would I actually achieve? I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to at that point. This is very early in my career, by the way, especially at club level, where it's very much volunteer based. But it's the attitude you get around the country, where language is different. It's what's acceptable in one place is not acceptable in another. And it's taken time to change those perceptions and those ideals of what you can and can't say to people. And change takes time.
And I suppose in terms of using your voice now, that was at the beginning of your career, but using your voice now that you are working within a space where you're kind of working with more clients around inclusion, you're working as a trustee, how have you been finding that? How are you using your voice to influence this space?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be part of the Great Britain Wheelchair Rugby Board. It's such a diverse board, and it really gives a good representation of the membership. When I was given the opportunity to do it, for me, it was about making changes that I couldn't make anywhere else. I've had the chance to be in the sport at grassroots, gone through club level to elite, and to be able to do some governance on it as well. To help new athletes coming through was an amazing opportunity. And I think for me, it's about sharing my experiences because I'm still involved in coaching the sport, and allowing more South Asians and people of different diverse backgrounds to access the sport. So I'm giving a bit of a different direction to the board. And
absolutely, I can already hear that you'll be enriching their decision making, no doubt. But what, if you think about, we have the leaders on this seminar today, we've got the minister, we've got NGB senior managers, and having heard, the discussion, the race representation index, and the way some of the NGBs have responded to that or not responded, having heard what you've heard, and with all of your experience as a Paralympian and now, really trying to use your voice in a different way, how do you think those leaders can better engage with the South Asian communities with disabilities in particular that want to progress through into the different talent pathways, especially in that kind of talent pathway to elite?
Yeah, for me, I think it's understanding that South Asians very much work as families. So engaging the athletes' family is really key. Giving them the confidence their child's going to be looked after. There's a pathway for them. There's an understanding of what they're getting into can really help. I think, if they invite them to training sessions, to competitions, and really share, how talented that child is, it gives the parents confidence to give more time to them into that sport. We have that problem at the moment that there's not a lot of representation at elite level with South Asians. So many South Asians are going to be career minded. It's very difficult to change that mindset until we get more athletes that are showing at the highest level. It's like chicken and egg almost with it. But engaging families and making them part of the sport will help break down those barriers and make it more accessible.
Thanks so much, Mandy. We're really thankful to you because, the power of you as a sports role model, it cannot be, argued with. Giving back to the sport, we see the work that you're doing. You know, on the chat right now, somebody's bigging you up, saying the work that you do with the ability people is amazing and inspiring, and inspiring elite sports and business people. So a massive thanks to you from Sporting Equals, and thank you for contributing to our panel. If we were in the room, we'd be giving you a massive clap. I'm giving you a clap now, Mandeep. You're a star. Thank you very much, and for stepping in. And seamlessly, we're now going to introduce Fiona May. So Fiona May, I gave you a bit of an introduction before, Fiona. I hope you're with us now. I can see your face in terms of your photo on the front of your image. Hopefully you can turn your camera on, Fiona. And we're going to introduce Fiona. I'm hoping that she's not having any technical difficulties. I've not received a message. So hopefully there she is.
Should you see me? Sorry.
Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Is that
Sorry,
a cat?
I've got my cat.
Is that your cat?
Sorry.
Oh, well, your
Yeah.
cat can make an appearance as well.
No, that'd be fine. Thank you.
It's wonderful to see you, Fiona. I did give you
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, it's lovely to see you on our screens today, and I gave you a very big introduction before, and I don't want you to feel as if you've missed it, but we do have Olympic royalty on our call today, everybody, all the way from Italy, long jump superstar. We are very, very lucky to have you. So welcome, Fiona. We want to hear all about your work in terms of international sports and the leadership roles that you've been spearheading in lots of different ways. So Fiona, just to start with, to get us warmed up, what's the weather like out there?
It's gorgeous, but tomorrow's going to be rain.
Oh,
so it's just the same.
All right, okay, we'll just go with it. It's a bit glum here, but I'm glad it's sunny there. So look, we have been talking about the state of race equality within sport and physical activity, and the need for leaders to do more, the need for greater representation at board level, at coaching levels. And these are not new issues. These aren't rehearsals. And for you in your roles at UEFA, at Puma, on the Sports Monitoring Advisory Panel, these are things that I know that you've been working hard on for a number of years. And so based on your experience as an athlete, as somebody and as an athlete who's, you know, still got your daughter competing at the highest level, she's doing amazingly. Your experiences as an administrator, as an athlete, can you tell us what you think the organisations and the sports bodies need to be doing to tackle some of the systemic issues around racism within sport?
I think the main problem is, I hate to say it, but that's just for personal reasons. They assume you in a box. So they see Fiona May as a long jumper and just an athlete, nothing else. And I think that it needs to be opened a bit more. Yeah, I had to really knock on doors and even break down doors to say, yes, I am an ex-athlete. I do have that experience, but I am qualified because I got a university degree in economics. And I know, looking at the administrative level, I need to be represented. So it was very difficult. I mean, they either look at you more very aggressive if you really put yourself forward, because they look at you more aggressive. And I think you just have to, I really had to work on my image, not just being a sport athlete, Olympic medalist, etc. So you have to show them that you are capable of knowing what's going on, because we do have the experience. And I think that's what people kind of stop you, especially in the higher ranks.
So as a black woman,
as a black woman, and like English become Italian, so they know I'm mixed with the culture and I know exactly what's going on. So it has been very difficult, I have to admit. I'm still pushing, and as I say, still the federations over here in Italy do not represent the majority of athletes there, even women. So, you know, administrative, we do not have a woman president. We only have one vice president, and that's only for CONI, but that's like a total official, it's like a title. But there's no representation still for women athletes, and let alone some people coming from different minorities who are competing, because especially athletics is really, really was a big boom, as you can imagine, after the Olympic Games last year. It was something special, it was something completely different, but we were the only sport. So I hate to say, but if you look at the Italian team, that's the only team like in Europe, like Mediterranean, which does not have a black football player. And it's not as if we don't have any, it's just that from the high downward, from some low, like grassroots, there are a lot of representations. But when you go further up, it's just nothing. So you really, I've been pushing a lot, not only just being a woman, but also being a Black athlete and representing Italy. So it's just, you just have to change it. I think it's a question of awareness as well. You have to be aware. They have to be aware to say that it's not reflecting the culture changes that are happening over here. And I think that's the same in England. England is still ahead, like 20, 30 years compared to Italy, but it's the top. It's all right, grassroots. It's fantastic. Everybody's pushing themselves, but it's really hard work. We need to go further on the same. So there needs to be like the Rooney Rule, as they said it did in America. We need that. We need that completely. You need to be aware. Those people, the presidents, vice presidents, and all the people on the board has to really look within themselves and be aware what's happening. Is it reflecting it? Reflecting the sport? Is it reflecting the culture? If it's not, what can we do? And I think that's what we need. That needs to be done.
And it's such an important point there you make around interventions and positive action that is redressing the racial inequities, because it's very, you know, these issues are very reflective here in UK sport. If we think about the amount of Black and brown athletes and Asian communities competing in grassroots football, for example, in women's football, and we don't see any of that reflected in the coaching structures other than Hope Powell and within the kind of real high level kind of leadership positions in the governance and the administration. So I think one of the things that I wanted just to pick up on is, you know, that you talked about it being difficult, right? And actually there's all that invisible work that you do. And I, as a fellow Black woman, I see that and I feel that, because I know what that journey is like, and knocking on the doors and creating the awareness. I'm thinking about you in the way in which you're doing that and actually providing yourself as a role model to so many other women who might look like you and might think, actually, I don't see myself represented in any of those positions. It's not a position for me, or anybody from a marginalized identity. So we have a number of different people on this seminar today, from people who are at grassroots, people who are at middle management in NGBs. What would be your advice to them if you were saying to them, look, you know, to be a part of this change, if we take what Jeff was saying about being a part of the professional and personal commitment, it needs so much of us. We know that, but we have to do that in a collective way. What would you say to them? What would you be advising them about in terms of, like, based on all of your experiences that you kind of brilliantly talked to us about? How would you get them involved in taking a leadership position?
I would don't you just have to change that mindset. Even I was a bit scared of going into football, like the FIGC, the Italian FA. I was scared, even the UEFA. I was scared because I thought, am I qualified? But you have to be convinced that you are qualified, to show them that you are capable of doing it. It's the hardest thing you can ever do. I can't say it's the easiest thing, but it's very, very difficult. But if you're confident, and you have to ask other people to help you and actually know, because my strategy is like, know your game. So if I want to know what's going on in UEFA, I need to know exactly from top to bottom, how is UEFA made of. So therefore, I know what I can just try and see if I can enter and try to be part of that collective, that federation. And then slowly but surely bringing people in and actually showing other people in a way that, open your eyes, look in this direction. Why don't we look at a different direction? Why can't we take it from another perspective? And I think that's it. But it is hard work. It's not, I wouldn't say I'm very, very comfortable being the only Black woman in certain committees, whatever, but it's the only way you can actually show. So you really have to really promote yourself in a good way, in a positive way, and also convince people that if Fiona May can do it, I can do it. It's not a question of Fiona May who did what. It's if you're capable of doing it, if you're educated, if you've got qualifications, and if you've got the passion for it, then why not? Sometimes the passion may not be enough. sometimes you really have to grit your teeth and just get out with it. I cannot say it's been easy, but if I prove myself 110%, then I can do it. But I always try to sneak people in and make people more aware what's going outside on the street level, because we can't look on top of the ivory tower, not anymore. We need to look really what's really going down on the ground, and everybody has to be aware with that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fiona. There was so much in what you just said there about how the importance of bringing others along on the journey, finding the part that you play, right? You knowing what you're good at, finding your unique perspective and how you can contribute to the agenda. And often a lot of people on this call today from grassroots community organizations are the first of difference, right? So you are the first of difference in those spaces, a coin turned by Shonda Rhimes, super producer from the US. And what that means in that you're creating that legacy and you're creating that the role modeling for others to follow in your path. Fiona, we admire, respect you. Thank you for being on the Sporting Equals advisory panel. We are very grateful to you and all of your contributions, especially in the track and field space. As a former athlete, I have to say that. And have a wonderful afternoon over there in Italy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao, tutti.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye. And a very last but not least at all, the final person on our panel, and I'm really excited to talk to Manisha Taylor today. Manisha is an incredible, outstanding football coach. She has an MBE, she's a leader, she's a teacher. She founded her grassroots organization a number of years ago. She uses football to engage with minority groups, including women and girls and those with mental health challenges. She was the first person of South Asian heritage to become assistant head coach at QPR Boys Academy. And we are really grateful for Manisha Taylor to be joining us today. And hopefully she's going to turn on her camera and turn on her mic so we can have our final panelists talk to us about what's been happening this morning. Wonderful, lovely to see you, Manisha.
Hi, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good, all the better for seeing you. How's it going there? I can see you're sporting your kit.
Yeah, because I'm going straight to the 23s game straight after this, and then over to Heston for the schoolboys for the evening.
Wonderful, and I wish you all the luck with all of that. But first, let's get your thought leadership on what's been happening today. So I know your work for many years now, and I've seen the pursuit of equity and equality in the work that you've been doing as a campaigner, as a coach, and as one of those rare Asian women that's up there really using your voice powerfully. So the question that I just want to ask is, you know, much of your career has been in male-dominated spaces. You know, you ruefully smile. I can see that smile there, Manisha. And I just want to ask you, as a South Asian woman, what is that like for you, and what do you want to share that you think will actually be really meaningful for some of the people on this session today?
It's been challenging, I think, on several folds. So one just being female. And almost trying to navigate your way through a very male dominated space. The other, as a South Asian female, I don't see very many South Asian females generally in the professional game. What's great is that we do have an increase in South Asian females in other positions, particularly around administrative roles or physios. Which I think is brilliant. However, coaching and management, you know, like you alluded to, I'd be the only one across the 92 clubs. And when we really look at that statistic, it makes you question, okay, well, where are the stats that actually tell us how many first foremost are qualified, either at UEFA or above, to be in a position to at least apply for those jobs? And then if we do have females who are from a South Asian community, or Black females who are UEFA qualified and have the ambition to work within the boys' professional game, where are the opportunities to allow that to happen? And for me, when we think about the fact that the role modeling piece is very important, if you don't see any that look like you within that position, it becomes very difficult to feel inspired and motivated to even think that it's possible. So you almost then have to think about, okay, well, sometimes you have to be prepared to walk alone and be that person who's going to be bold and be very resilient in almost finding your way through this new, through this territory, but also trying to pave the way for others. Then we've also got the aspect of the fact that I get perceived as somebody, perhaps not so much now, and it's taken a long time to overcome that, but definitely before, around not being seen as a football person. So when you're coming from a completely different sector and then, using transferable skills that we do have, and it's great almost being the last person on the panel and hearing what the others had to say, because it definitely resonates with myself, that I come from the world of education. And although in my last role, I was a deputy head and I worked an assistant head before that, had been a senior manager for many years and qualified as a head teacher, so came in with other experiences, I did have my UEFA B coming into the professional game. However, people will look at you as if you lack knowledge in football, you're not seen as this football person. I grew up, so I'll be 42 this year, and I grew up in a time where there were very few opportunities for women, particularly Black and Asian women, to take part in football. So playing as a professional was never going to be in my lifetime, because of the stereotypes and biases that certainly existed then, and the lack of opportunities. So when you're coming in from something different, you have to work 10 times harder, even though you have the baseline qualifications to do the job. Then you've also got the fact that I'm very small in stature. So people that have met me and know me, I'm really small, I'm 4'9.5". And when you are small, you also get perceived as being very young. When I first actually started at QPR and I was volunteering as a 36-year-old, but you're having to overcome the fact that actually you are young in experience in the professional game. And I was very honest about where I was at in my journey, and still am. However, was coming in as an older person with other life experiences. So when you're having to, and I go back the navigating piece, navigating your way through this environment that is tough, because you do not see people like you. I don't think the professional game at the moment is ready for females within the type of role that I do. And I don't think it's ready particularly for Black and South Asian females. And the reason I say that is because we see initiatives, and I think it's brilliant. So I've benefited from the Premier League's ECAS program. And had it not been for the ECAS program and the funding that it provided, perhaps I might have, there's might, I might not have had the opportunity to actually become full-time and might still be part-time, So I recognize that the Premier League and the FA are trying, and there are endeavors there to try and redress this imbalance through these schemes. But the question we have to ask is, why do the schemes exist? The schemes exist because there isn't a level playing field, that there's a real lack of opportunities for people like me and others on this call. And when you look at the hierarchies, which are the people in power who can actually influence this change because they hold the power to make the decisions on who gets employed, again, the board itself and people in those positions as heads of coaching, as academy managers, are not as diverse as we would like. Now, I'm in a fortunate position at QPR because we have an extremely diverse board. We are also very diverse in terms of workforce across the club, whether you're the chef, you're the physio, whether you're the coach, the cleaner, whatever it might be. Everybody does feel included because of the culture that I feel that we have in place at the club. And when I talk about hierarchies and decision makers, like our academy manager, Alex Carroll, is a white male, however, very empathetic, very open to inclusion and diversity, and will also be open about asking questions and finding out and being inquisitive. And I think that's key, because it's not about me saying that you have to be somebody from an ethnic minority community to actually understand what these adversities are. What you do have to do, I believe, in my opinion, is be open to the fact that diversity matters and that we need diverse skill set. If we are to ensure that there's an approach where we have diversity with players, with workforce, well, that has to come from the top. And in order for that to come to the top, you have to have a level of empathy to know and recognize that actually this is really important. And ask yourself the question, does your organization represent the demographic in which it serves? And if it doesn't, then surely there's a problem.
Absolutely. Manisha, you've covered my questions in your one answer. That's been amazing, because you've talked so much about the intersections, you've talked about pipeline, you've talked about resilience, and you've talked about people in power, sharing power, and the fact that we need empathy. Fantastic. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you for all that you do, all of that invisible work that goes on behind the scenes. You're very lucky to be in such an inclusive culture with Les and Chris and everybody there, but I know what it takes to be a woman of color in that kind of environment. So good luck with the fixtures today. We are rooting for you. Thank you, Manisha. So we have had an esteemed panel there, everybody. How great was that? And I know there have been lots of questions about board governance, about the Rooney Rule on the Q&A. Sporting Equals will endeavour to get back to you. So all that it leaves me to do to say is we are nearly at our finish line with just a minute to go. So I want to thank everybody today, all of our speakers. I encourage all of you to think about what you're going to do differently. What has resonated with you? Talk to somebody else about this. Share today's summit with somebody else. Sporting Equals has a wealth of information and resource out there for you. We have heard from the great and the good about the challenges, about the opportunities, and everything that we can do to also get involved collectively. A big thanks to me, your host, Michelle Moore, author of my new book, Real Wins, that looks at some of the issues that we've been talking about today. A big thanks to Sporting Equals. Thank you for inviting me along. So please do complete the digital evaluation form and share how you found the event on socials today. A reminder that you can access this event via YouTube and when you want to share it with others. So I'd now like to invite the chair of Sporting Equals, Denzine White, back to say a few words to round up.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks for winding up the meeting and for hosting this event for the second year for us. It's fantastic to have had you back again this year, and good luck with the new book. I'd just like to basically thank everybody who's participated today, and especially the panel members, Manisha Taylor, Manisha Taylor, Fiona May. I'd like to thank Tim Hollingsworth of Sport England for supporting our event again, the Minister Nigel Huddleston, Jeff Thompson, and Amma Agbazi for giving such a great presentation on the process of putting together the Race Representation Index. And obviously, I'd like to thank the Sporting Equals senior management team for pulling this great event together. And I'm looking forward to the next version of this event in 2023. Thanks again to everybody who's participated and helped us to make this such a successful event. Thank you, Michelle.